Welcome back, everyone, to the next installment of the MediaWiki Users and Developers Workshop. This is taking place at NASA, so appropriately enough, our keynote speaker is also from NASA. I'm pleased to announce James Montalvo, who is a flight controller instructor and software developer at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Texas. Here he is, James.
Thanks, Yaron. Can everybody hear me? First off, thank you for inviting me. This is a great setup. I particularly have liked the multi-TV situation. We lost one of those in the middle, and it felt very, in the middle of one of the talks, it felt very NASA. It was like you lose one TV, but you got redundancy. You can still get to space if you lose one engine, kind of thing. I also learned don't touch anything unless Carl tells you to. That's my lesson learned. Project to everybody else. So anyway, my name is James Montalvo. As Yaron said, I'm from NASA Johnson, and I'm a flight controller instructor, and I lead a software team now. So my talk is low-entropy knowledge management. I've already had a couple people comment on that name, and so I'm going to caveat up front. If you are a physicist or a better engineer than I am, please accept that this is an analogy, and don't kill me on the technical details. So I'm going to start with two things. One, I'm going to bring up a definition of entropy. Yeah, all right. Definition of entropy from Wiktionary, and I'm also going to bring up way too many. I'm getting this here. Way too many words for a slide. This is a very NASA thing to do, just a barrage of words at you on a slide. So I'm going to just reduce that down to some of the keywords from that definition. So entropy is disorder present in a system, energy that cannot be used to do work, energy that's hidden, and a tendency to descend into chaos. Aside from that word energy there, which feels a little funny in knowledge management, that all sounds like a bad knowledge management system. We don't want that. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. First, I'll say who I am, give you a little background on why maybe, hopefully, my perspective is a little important, but I'll let you be the judge of that. I started at NASA JSC in 2008. I started there. I came from a aerospace startup, joined NASA JSC to be a flight controller and instructor. What that means is I was hired to teach astronauts to perform spacewalks, and then when I became a flight controller, then work in mission control while they're doing spacewalks to help them do it effectively. Nobody goes to school and learns how to do a spacewalk. So you arrive at NASA not really knowing how to really do your job, and so a lot of the early time for anybody, for any flight controller or instructor position, the early time you're there, the first year, 2 years, 3 years, it depends on the org, is spent with a lot of studying. There's a lot of learning how to do your job. And so with that came doing a bunch of things, gathering a bunch of information. And one of the things that really bothered me early on was I got asked to kind of review this new software tool, and I'm going to air quotes new software tool that we were going to use for ordering hardware for a training event. And it looked like something out of the early 80s. It was the worst user interface I've ever used in my life. And my background is mechanical engineering. I didn't do software, but I was like, I guarantee I can do better than this. So that's where I kind of became a software guy within my group, and started building replacements for things like that. I mean, nothing big, nothing extravagant, but just, we can do better than this. And so part of that became, I had, some servers at my disposal. And so in 2011, along with some other people in my group that I'm sure many of you know, like Darren Welsh and Scott Ray, and we founded what was called the EVA Wiki. EVA is extravehicular activity. It means spacewalk. It means you get in a spacesuit, get in an airlock, and then they open the door and you're outside in space in just your spacesuit. So we founded the EVA Wiki to solve that problem. You can see that 3 years from when I joined to when we founded this. We founded it to solve the problem of, we've got a hard copy manual over here that we have to read to get up to speed and get our certifications. And we've got this website over here as a plain HTML type website that somebody made at some point. And we've got videos over here, and it's go talk to this person over here, and SharePoint over here, and all that sort of thing. It was this information that was spread everywhere. And anytime you had to kind of recertify, it was playing the hunting game of, has any of this moved? That hard copy manual that's supposedly in the file cabinet over there, it moved up to another floor, or it's out of date, or whatever. That HTML website, just plain website, doesn't exist anymore, and now it's in Confluence. Or it was on SharePoint, but now we're on SharePoint 2012, and the links are different. Stuff like that. So we founded the EVA Wiki to kind of solve that problem. And then spent a bunch of years building out our wiki, and other people saw what was successful there and asked for their own. So for their own group, the robotics group, the biomedical engineering group, created their own wikis on our platform. And that was good. We got more people to join this group and do things in a better way. But we also started to have somewhat of a problem of lots of wikis. So at that point, we figured out how to merge into one ISS wiki, ISS being International Space Station. So we merged a bunch of wikis into one. At that point, I became lead of a different group. I still work on wikis like as a user on a day-to-day basis. I'm still an administrator. I still do some server administrating type stuff. I'm not really a developer anymore. Anyway, that's kind of my arc as a wiki person, just leading into this. So going back to the point of the talk here. So entropy, again, is these 4 things. And I want to look at kind of how our knowledge entropy within sort of the EVA group, within the ISS, what we call plan, train, fly organizations. So plan, train, fly is kind of your training as an instructor, your planning, what kind of missions we're going to do, how we're going to do them, and then fly is the astronauts are actually out doing something. We got to make sure that they do it right, safely, et cetera. So when I joined, and again, you can see the timeline on the bottom here is similar to the one that I was on the previous page, showing just my history. When I joined, the entropy was very high. The organization, and going back to this slide, there was a lot of disorder present in the system. There was a lot of things hidden, right? That file cabinet with the hard copy procedure was hidden on somebody else's office now. So the entropy was very high. And my friend, coworker, Darren came to me as I had started doing these, building these various software products and said, hey, can we try MediaWiki? Can you skirt that into one of our test servers or something? And so I think this is a common theme that many people have had, especially in enterprise environments where it was kind of a start your server under the desk sort of situation, right? So we did that. And what we did is we kind of just started picking off small, easy, low-hanging fruit. We said, okay, we've got this certification guide. When you're first getting certified to be an instructor, you have to go and do these things. Or when you're recertifying every however many years, you have to do these things. And I've already explained, that's the thing where you're going out and looking for stuff, figuring out where the data is. That was a really easy, hey, let's just copy paste this over there and fix the links as we go, right? And then the next person that comes through and goes, oh, now that thing's moved again, fix the link again, fix the instructions again, versus it being some hard copy thing that is not easy to fix. And then we picked up a bunch of different low-hanging fruit. Lesson plans, forms to order hardware, and many other things. And it was kind of like, hey, let's tackle that data source, pull it in. And it's just each one of those things really dropped the disorder of the group. And the interesting thing is, at this point, Darren and myself and Scott, we kind of lived in fear every day that management would come along and be like, hey, stop that wiki business. Because they weren't on board yet, and wikis are dangerous, and anybody can edit them, and all the things I'm sure you've all heard. But it was kind of at some point like this, where it was like so clearly better that it changed from being afraid that somebody was going to come and tell us to stop to being afraid that it was going to be mentioned yet again in another meeting for how we should do something that we really shouldn't put in wiki. Hey, let's go put this high criticality system for running on console when you're in mission control in wiki, and we're like, don't do that. And it was like literally a matter of days, it totally flipped. If you've seen the Crossing the Chasm book or diagram, it's like, it was that, right? It went from fear that we were going to be shut down to fear that we were going to be massively overused. And in that period of time, it's like we kind of gobbled up everything. Everything that could be put on wiki, and probably some things that shouldn't have. Not like illegal or anything like that, but didn't export anything or whatever. But a lot of things that maybe we overdid it went on wiki, and it got way, way, way better. As I said on the previous slide, or one of the previous slides, we then had other groups going, well, that works a lot better. We want that too. And so we had the robotics group, the biomedical engineering group, et cetera, come along. And there's a lot of overlap between these things. I mean, they may not care specifically about the spacesuit, and we may not care necessarily about the inner workings of a robotic arm, but those things do play together during spacewalks. Crew members get in spacesuits, and then they go out, and robotic arms handle things, or they ride on the end of a robotic arm. So there was a lot of duplication, both in the content, but then also in things like templates. Right? Everybody has whatever you call it, whether it's an employee template or a person template or whatever. We all had those. And initially, they probably all got copied from the EVA wiki, because why would you recreate it? But then over time, they diverged. It's like, well, why does the robotics wiki show the person's picture, but the EVA one doesn't? Oh, we should add that. We're going to do it a little bit differently because we've got other changes. So this is where that entropy starts increasing. And as I mentioned, we determined we needed to find a way to join those together. And that was a kind of both a technical and a cultural, kind of political problem. One, we had to say, or we've got, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but many thousands of pages on both, or on all of these wikis that we want joined. How do we do that? How do we say, make this into one? But then also, how do we get everybody on board to say that everybody that can see all this robotics information is also allowed to see all this spacesuit information? The robotics group I'm gesticulating wildly, sorry. The robotics group at JSC is partially Canadian. The robotic arm on the space station is provided by the Canadian Space Agency. And so many of the flight controllers and instructors are Canadian. It causes problems with exporting information. So it was really kind of a two-pronged approach of figure out those political, cultural, whatever problems, but then also figure out how to automate a system where we could, ultimately we could run a script and it would generate a wiki off of other wikis. It wasn't perfect, and it kind of said, hey, you've got duplicates here and they're not identical, right? It's like you've got this person page in two places, they're slightly different. But it allowed us to basically click a button, get a wiki. There was a merge. And then go and look at it and go, okay, what are the problems? Let's go back to the originals and rectify those problems. And so we eventually made that happen and brought our entropy back down. But over time, it starts to creep back up. And so 2021 was approximately the time where we started to have a little bit more of a problem. And those two problems were people like myself and Darren and Scott basically got different jobs. I'm still in the same group, but I do something else. Darren is in a separate organization now, still related to EVA, but not in the same place. And the same with Scott. And several of the other people that, I'm not going to go through all the names, but we're all still users, but we didn't have the energy to continue focusing on like how can we make the wiki better on a day-to-day basis. And so that while we saw a slight creep up, we also then lost a lot of important people for it, and at the same time kind of changed our paradigm. So ISS is very open. International Space Station is international. We share a lot of information with all the different groups, all the different space agencies. It's not to say we can share everything. We have to be kind of careful, but it is the overall feeling, for lack of a better word, is that it's fairly open. In 2021 was really the start of a lot of the Artemis program work. That is going back to the moon, et cetera. And part of that is, while there's still international cooperation, there's a lot of private companies. And stuff private companies make is proprietary. And not only do we have to be careful to can see it, I'm a contractor, I'm not actually a civil servant, but who within NASA can see it, but also who within those other private companies can see that information. And it gets a lot more complicated. So that entropy has started to grow more because we start saying, well, this info can be seen by SpaceX, but it can't be seen by Blue Origin and vice versa. And here's some spacesuit information coming from Axiom, and they need to be able to coordinate with SpaceX because the spacesuit needs to be able to plug into the airlock on the vehicle. Like, where do we allow those Venn diagrams to overlap? It's a really hard problem, and I'm unfortunately not going to provide any solutions necessarily today. I'm going to bring up problems and hope other people think about them. But if I had solutions, I'd probably be getting a big promotion. So yeah. But what I'm going to say today, and I've taken a really long time getting there, I apologize for that, is despite all this, MediaWiki, in my opinion, is the lowest entropy knowledge management system. Because if at that point in 2021, we said, well, let's just throw everything into individual documents and give them individual permissions on a case-by-case basis, we'd look more like this, right? You'd have so-and-so creates a document, they throw it in a folder, and they say, Rich and your own can see it. And even though Cindy should be able to see it, they don't have it, right? And that happens day to day, thousands of people, and over time, you get the ugly red line there. So, why is MediaWiki low entropy? And this is kind of an outline for the remainder of my talk. It took me that long to get to the agenda. One, it's anti-silo. Two, it shows the full, it uses the full knowledge graph, and then it's maximally observable. So I'm going to go through how it does those things, why they're important, and then at the end I'll also ask you, how do we do better? Because again, I don't have the answers. So, anti-silo. One, wiki farms tend to be fewer, larger silos. Ideally, we're something like Wikipedia, where it's just one big thing. Unfortunately for us, we've never been able to get there to just one. Whether it was in the ISS phase, it was some groups being resistant to bringing their stuff into the bigger thing, even though they probably could. Versus now in the Artemis phase, where there's legitimate reasons why we can't share data for everybody. But it's still, single digits, double digits kind of silos, low double digits kind of silos, versus each individual document effectively being its own silo. And one of the most important things about this is it forces you to make that decision up front. Who's in on this wiki? What data is in on this wiki? And we get from people sometimes saying, oh, well, in wiki you can't decide, I can't set permissions or whatever, that's a bad thing. But I call it a feature. Because that upfront decision making is critical. And the reason it's critical is people always make the easiest decision. I've already said it a couple of times. People are always going to go, all right, Rich and your own, you can see this document. And they're going to forget all the rest of you that probably could see it. Because at the time, they're busy, they're just going to do the minimal. And over time, you're going to get everybody squirreling away data in little places. So the second law of thermodynamics is entropy of an isolated system left to spontaneous evolution cannot decrease with time. And because of that, making that decision up front, we're not leaving it to spontaneity. We've already made the decision. It's not just, right now I've made something and I need to share it. It is, I pick where it goes, and then it's out to everybody that can and should be able to see it. Without that, you get the red line. So talk a little bit more about the anti-siloing thing, and I think it's a requirement that I say AI some number of times today. Otherwise, the overlords will be angry at me. So we've got a bunch of internal AI and large language model teams within JSC and NASA in general. And in my experience, they like our wikis. When I go to presentations about what they're working on, wiki is generally the top or maybe even the only source that they mention. And the reason is it's more open, right? It's clear cut. They look at it and they go, cool, all of this info can go to all of these people that I can pull from API. It's not little bits that are changing all the time. Not related to styling, but the other benefit is that MediaWiki APIs are more stable. I'm not going to say that they're perfectly stable. Somebody's going to shout at me and throw things at me and say that, you know, it cost them months of work to go deal with something. But I personally have been burned a number of times by proprietary knowledge management systems working on, I can't remember if I said this already, working on version 2012, and then you fast forward to version 2016, and it's like, oh, this thing doesn't work anymore. Now I got to go rebuild it all because endpoints change and whatnot. So just looking at this anti-siloing concept, going back to the definitions, this one really focuses on, you know, not having multiple silos where I can't see this over here. I can't use this information to do work because it's hidden to me. All right, I saw Rich give a high five or whatever, fist bump, when I said full knowledge graph. I hope I hit the points that you want. So I drew a little graph here, and I'm going to call them document databases. There's lots of them. NASA has a bunch of internal ones, but essentially SharePoint is a document database, right? You upload your Office document, and maybe it's put in some sort of folder structure, but it's really just nodes. I guess you could look at that folder structure as some lightweight graph, but for the most part, it's just those individual items in isolation. And that works pretty well for static and kind of like sort of finalized information. So things like, here's the procedure for doing X, or here's the requirements document for doing Y. And it's working fine for things like SpaceX saying, here's what we're going to provide, and then there's a clear cut, you have this window to review kind of thing, and then providing that feedback, right? It's not a living document for internal information. But it fails to maintain relationships is really the big thing. So one thing we have, I'm sure anybody here that's from NASA is going to appreciate this. I go and read like some massive NASA requirements document, and at the front there's a table that's like referenced documents, and sometimes they're quite big, and they're not clickable, right? I can't click on them and generally get to that document. So it's like, all right, now I got to find that document. But even if they were clickable, even if they were nicely linked together, it's just to the broad document. It's not going into it. It's not the document broken up into sections or anything like that. So you have those relationships where you might have some requirements document that references one tiny section of some other requirements document. And at the point you read the part that references that, now you got to go read a 200-page document. Figure that out. Versus Wiki, especially with Cargo and SMW, they're the full knowledge graph. And I'm preaching to the choir here, so I don't know that I need to go into too much info there, but the places where I've found that to be really beneficial is in that kind of hard to classify info. So that's stuff like some vendor comes along and demonstrates some new thing that is kind of a paradigm shift for us. We don't have anything in our current knowledge that is like it. So it's not like I can go to SharePoint and be like, find this folder. Okay, yeah, that thing there, it belongs there. It's like, here's this new thing. On Wiki, I create that page. I link outbound to things that might be referenced to. I go and find some other things that can link to it. And now it's part of that whole knowledge graph. Otherwise, honestly, I'm gonna toss that thing in like a miscellaneous folder on SharePoint. I tried to write this to not rag on SharePoint, but it's really hard. The other place that is really, really, really important is that tacit knowledge, stuff that we all know within the organization, or many of us know within the organization, but isn't really written down, isn't really classified necessarily. An example of that is, I remember at one point, I was thinking about an upcoming spacewalk, and I knew that the hardware that we were going to be dealing with had a failure on one of the bolts on a previous EVA. That's all I remembered. And how I ended up finding that information was, I know that Jackie was involved with that EVA. That's all I remembered about it. And I went to Jackie's page on our wiki, and I was able to go and kind of look through the things she'd been involved with, click on them, see the things that they had, the types of hardware they had interfaced with, and then go and find the specific EVA that was on. Furthermore, we've done analysis of the links in our wiki, and the graph traversal, the furthest point away, any point in the wiki, and I can't remember the number right now, but it's something like 4 or 5 is the longest jump, and it's almost entirely because of the links between people. It's so-and-so took notes on that one time in a meeting, right? Like, you're not getting that by putting documents in a database. By saying your own commented on this in a meeting or took notes on this in a meeting one time, now I know I can be like, hey, do you know more about that? And he might be like, no, but I ended up giving that info over to Rich, and now I'm going somewhere. So again, some of the things that talked about there, you just toss something in a miscellaneous folder in SharePoint, and you've got disorder, right? Like how do you go find that thing? And it kind of automatically is hidden as soon as you've done that. All right, this one I really like. And, I think it's one of the most important things. And MediaWiki is great because it is really easy to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the system. So you've got things like recent changes and page history and watch lists, and that's all things that allow you to see what is happening. And I don't see anything similar in other real knowledge management systems, nearly as powerful. But also it's the ability to arbitrarily diff. You can go and do track changes on a Word document. It is really cumbersome to go and say, show me all the versions of this Word document ever and show me the points over time. It can be done if you go and poke around. It can be done, but it's a pain. It is essential to the way Wikipedia works, and that's the way all of our wikis work. So talking a little bit more about observability, but actually let's just say AI more. So far, the LLM creators, and maybe creators isn't the right word, but the people that are doing LLMs inside NASA JSC, they want to read our wikis, which I already said. They want to provide a ChatGPT-like interface where you can say, tell me the hardware that has the greatest mass across all of these, right? Which you could do with a semantic cargo query too, but you get the point. At some point, they will want to write to our wikis, and we will want them to write to our wikis. We will want them to be able to provide some sort of agent system that says, go up and clean this stuff up, or provide me with information about where maybe we have conflicts or missing information. And we want that. But we can't have that without that maximum observability. We can't just let a AI agent go wild on our wikis and be like, it'll probably be okay, right? Because they're wrong a lot. Hopefully they get wrong less over time, but there's a lot of hallucination out there, and we need to be able to watch what they're doing. And anybody that's used, we've got somebody that's going to be doing a vibe coding demonstration. And one of the next ones, like, monitoring what it's doing is pretty important. And so we need that in our knowledge management when we get to that point with AI editing. So this one could probably touch all the bullets here, but I think probably the number 4, especially considering that AI editing thing, is probably the most important. It's just we let them go wild, we will have chaos, we will have incorrect information, and we don't want that. So those are the kind of 3 key things that I think make MediaWiki excellent. I realize I'm preaching to the choir here. Clearly you can tell that I like MediaWiki a lot. But I do have a couple of questions for you. So that's not a question. But could have been. Documents are useful. So this is a PowerPoint. I mean, I didn't go and make a MediaWiki page for this because it wouldn't have been visually pleasing necessarily. I guess I could have put a lot of work into it to make it happen. But there's also need to be able to create a document and email it out to some external person. Obviously, documents are useful. So the question is, how can we do better with that? I think there's some capability to be able to index documents in MediaWiki search. I don't love to talk to anybody that's doing it well. I don't think we're doing it well. But it goes beyond that too, right? Just being able to search it is one thing, but also being able to kind of link in and out of it is another. So, you know, I'm thinking things like, you've got your PowerPoint, but what if on your PowerPoint slide you could put cargo or semantic annotations somehow hidden in it? I don't know if it's invisible or if it's down footer or what. I'm just making things up here, but trying to get ideas out there. That when it gets indexed, it's able to say, well, this document on this particular slide or this particular page is able or has information related to this. I think that would be amazing, and that would draw people in to want to use Wiki even more for things that they're otherwise just dropping on a document database. The other thing is, are we okay with letting these document databases handle kind of fine-grained access control cases? As I said, there's nothing we're going to do about SpaceX and Blue Origin not being able to see the same stuff. We have to deal with that situation. And if it's a huge overlap, maybe we make a wiki. But if it's just a little overlap, there's a place for this sort of thing. So I know some people do use extensions that provide some more fine-grained access control. We don't, for a couple of reasons. One, we've never been real confident in how sure we can go. Like, we can trust them from a don't go to prison for having accidentally exported something on like a systemic many people level. So there's that, but then there's also, as I said earlier, that line we draw in the sand of these people are in, this document, this data is in, and these people and this data are out. Like, that is a powerful tool, drawing that line. That has allowed us to say, not make those spontaneous decisions at the time you create data. So I don't know if there's a way we can have our cake and eat it too here, of provide the capability to say, this page, you're not in on any of this wiki except for this page. And Rich, you're in on this wiki except this page. I don't know if there's a way we can do that and still have that line drawing. You know, if we put enough friction into it that it's, okay, yeah, we have this capability. People would rather have access to the whole thing because it's unpleasant to have to do it this way. Maybe that's the way to handle it. But without it, even if our wiki looks like the yellow line, and every so often we kind of resync and put the effort in to bring it back down to that lowest level, if we're just kind of putting our hands up and saying, it's all right, this stuff can go over here, like, yeah, our wiki is low entropy, but us as a whole is not. Right? Because we've got chaos over on this other side, because the wiki people went, nah, it's all right. So that's my talk. Questions?
If you could just repeat people's questions.
Or I can bring it.
Okay, well, yeah, it's difficult.
From the other perspective of, we're all fans of MediaWiki, but there are many shortcomings. What were the biggest problems that you ran into?
So early on,
Repeat the question.
oh, sorry. Yep. I got to repeat the question. So I said we're all fans of MediaWiki here. We're all friends. I added that part. But what were the shortcomings that caused issues early on? Is that? Or now. So early on, it was kind of funny. We actually didn't call it the EVA Wiki initially because that word was so like scary to some people that we actually called it the EVA library. And it's kind of funny, like every so often I'll stumble upon a page where it still says that. I don't know why we haven't done a find replace on it. Maybe because it's just kind of nostalgic to run into it still. But yeah, I mean, it's funny how that just, it's just a cultural change for people to accept that it's editable by lots of people and that's okay. And I think we've largely won people over. There are still holdouts. But it's kind of, we got that critical mass of people that are doing it and are being successful with it, and it's clearly showing value, that worked out. I actually had one of the other projects I work on now, I was talking to a developer on it, and I said to him something along the lines of, okay, several of the things that I've worked on at NASA have kind of followed that arc of, you have some period of time where you're terrified that people are going to tell you to stop it. And then, like, all of a sudden, bit flip, and now everybody wants to use it for everything. And so it's just, you like have a different kind of terror from one end to the other. And he looked at me like, that's terrible. Like, why would you do that? So anyway, I'm probably saying more than you want, but that word was a problem. We've built a number of extensions, so there were certain things where we wanted to have kind of more fine-grained control on editing. So your own approved revs was key there. We made some changes to that early on, and that kind of allowed us to tailor it to our needs there of kind of essentially, things like lesson plans where you are informing the next generation of how they're supposed to operate. Management wanted to keep their finger on the pulse of that. I think a lot of it over time we've kind of removed. It was a kind of a necessary transition to be able to say, yeah, we can make it so that your own can make the edit, but then Rich has to go and approve it. But then over time the managers were like, okay, well, people don't make bad edits, so like if people are unsure about it, like, we're all professionals here. This isn't the internet, right? If people are unsure, they go and talk to people. And so I think for the most part, over time, management has gone, cool, I don't want to have to take this extra step. I don't want it to be on me to be the one that's holding up the process because I'm busy doing other things. So, is that?
I was talking about, like, the software itself. Has it put up any barriers for you? In the user experience, in usage, anything like that?
Early on, people, so this is 2011 timeframe, people did not like having to learn wiki text. Since then we've got forms and we've got visual editor and whatnot, so that kind of has gone away. I think for the most part, people like the experience. I think that some people that come in, some of the cases where it's a little more broad information. So like if you're talking about EVA, like it's a lot of very specific technical information, and it's all very tightly connected. But if you take that And again, we merged our wikis, so merged with the robotics group and the biomedical group and whatnot. But then you kind of layer on top of that, like, here's how you request a tour of the such and such lab, right? There's a page for that. It doesn't really connect to a whole lot of other things. So I think some people come to our wikis and go, how do I find that information? They can search, and if they search the right terms, they get it. So that kind of encouraging people to be smart about how to connect information together. If I go and search for something that I think that I know is there and I think I should find it and I don't find it, like I go and improve the page to be more findable. But like I think to do stuff like that, and probably 99% of users don't. That's probably the biggest technical hurdle.
Kind of curious, what was, as you say, the bit flip moment where it turned from a project to like the buy-in?
Yeah. Oh yeah. What was the question is? What was the bit flip moment that changed it from? I don't remember what you said, but like scared that we'd get canceled to everybody being bought into it. I think at some point we just got to our management like 2 levels up, and they just went, yeah, this is a good idea. This is how we're doing it now. I mean, this was a person that we were afraid of prior to that, right? But it was enough good things happened, and I'm guessing he talked with people that weren't the founders, right? That were users that it wasn't their baby, right? And they were saying, this is a good thing. Because how I've explained it to a lot of people is like, you'd go to do your recertification or your first certification, and you'd go to this like paper document before and get frustrated that things weren't there, right? Like you'd have this paper document and be like, this is wrong, and then you'd hopefully tell the next person, hey, FYI, the document's wrong. So when you get to this, go to this new place. But when it changed over to Wiki, it was like, people arrived, clicked on things, and things worked better than they did before. Right? Immediately, they get through some phase of it, and they go, this is great. Like, stuff is where it's supposed to be, or where it says it is. So that feels good to them. And then they find something that's not where it's supposed to be. It has moved since the last person went through it, because, I mean, there's not any way to avoid that. And they make an economic decision at that point of, okay, I just spent 10 minutes figuring out where this thing is now. The next person's going to come along, and they're either going to spend 10 minutes finding out, or I can spend the minute it's going to take me to figure out how to edit this stupid thing that I've never edited before, and put that information in there. And it's like, I'm going to save this next person 10 minutes by spending a minute now. And that compounded eventually. And I think when that started to compound, management looked at that, talked to people that were using it that were not us, that were not going to say it's great no matter what, biased, right? And just changed his mind. Like, it was literally a directive. This is what we're using now.
We have a question from YouTube. Are there any plans to increase the usage of MediaWiki further within NASA? And if so, what are the hurdles to that, technical or otherwise?
Okay, so NASA's a big place. Oh, sorry, really bad at this part. This is why I'm not MC, for that and many reasons. So the question from online was, are there plans to further increase the usage of MediaWiki around NASA? Is that good? So NASA's a big place, and I'm certainly not the person to answer for NASA as a whole. I think that's Rich, so I'll let him take that later. At JSC, I can speak to that much more. And specifically, I'm within the Flight Operations Directorate. That's the people that deal with mission control and training astronauts and whatnot. I would say we are steadily increasing in some regards and kind of level on others. More people get familiar with it all the time. Where it's kind of staying level is there's that concept of stuff that has to be in one, accessible to one vendor or another, that is just not being used in Wiki. And so we are in a constant push of what can we add to this more broad Artemis wiki versus go into some document database. And it's a constant battle. I mean, even on ISS, where it was easier to have these conversations, it was a constant battle to say, yes, we should allow these Canadian astronauts. I mean, they're astronauts. They go to the space station. We should allow them to have access to this thing. I mean, that kind of thing kind of never ends. It's always going to be, anytime there's new information, there's going to be some amount of arguing on what should be done with it. So, Rich, I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Sure. So there's, yeah.
Okay, thanks, James. My name is Richard Evans, Information Systems Management Lead here at the facility. On the question of what is NASA doing across the agency to engage with MediaWiki, the short answer is that the agency has a working group that develops an agency handbook on how to implement knowledge management solutions and software solutions for a variety of things. We have been working for the past 2 years with that working group to have a specific chapter added to the agency's handbook on software solutions, a section dedicated to wikis in general, and a section that ultimately makes recommendations on how users, if they identify that they need a wiki, what the agency officially recommends that they use. And we've boiled that down to 2 choices, and one of them is MediaWiki. And the version of that handbook that provides that guidance is forthcoming maybe in the next couple of weeks. So sometime in the early summer, we should see the update to that handbook that has that agency guidance that includes MediaWiki.
I have a question. Well, you talked about the need to communicate with other organizations and companies. And you know there's a fine-grained control of that. Is MediaWiki being used for any of that? And if not, what software is being used? Sorry, I can't repeat the question that I just asked.
So Yaron asked regarding the need to be able to communicate to kind of external vendors and having some amount of fine-grained access to data when we're doing so. To what degree is MediaWiki being used? We do have internal wikis that are specific to certain vendors. Not all of them, because there's a lot, and that we don't want to go there. Even if they did ask for it, I think we'd probably limit that. But some of the bigger ones we do have internal wikis for. While I have sysadmin access to them, I don't go and read the info because it's not something I'm supposed to read. It's not something I'm supposed to be working on, so I can't say how dynamic they are, but we do have them. I don't think it's the major source for a lot of the kind of NASA to vendor communication, though. That is largely kind of discrete packages of information that go back and forth. Here is your set of requirements, here is our response to that set of requirements, here are comments back, that kind of thing. It's much more of a communication protocol versus a knowledge sharing kind of location.
On the topic of how we can do better, we have here at Armstrong, we have the same problems that you described with different access control lists, and we also have you're either in or you're out of a given wiki. We solve the problem by using automation on the server side. So there's okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask James to repeat all that. So one of James's questions was, how can we do better? And he described a problem where we inevitably have to have partitions in our wikis. And some people can see content in one and not the other. And the way to solve that, we have the same problem here at Armstrong Test Facility, and the way that we solve it is by utilizing an automation client, a Python automation client called, wait for it, MW client. And by implementing this bot on the server side, we can program rules. And based on where the file was uploaded, what the content contains, article names, file names, we can put rules into place for the maintenance script that will automatically sync that file to other places that it needs to be seen. And we are also able to do it by adding templates that when the file is synced to some other secondary location, that it receives a template that carries the information of where the definitive version is kept, so that the user seeing it on a secondary site, not only can they see it because the MW client put it there, but it puts it there with a breadcrumb that tells them where it came from. And then we can further automate it to say that if somebody were to update it on the secondary site, they could potentially lay claim to it, and there's the bot allows an actual negotiation between wikis to decide which version is definitive. And so the bot then is flipping the bit as to which wiki has the definitive version of the document or the article, and if it's edited from the definitive side, it gets published to the places where it needs to be synchronized. So we do have a solution, and I would love to spend more time showing you those things, and I think that is one way that we could improve.
Yeah, I was going to say, what time's your presentation on that topic?
It's a forthcoming presentation. It's not.
Yeah, that sounds really great. So what I'm taking from that is basically you're able to mark pages or portions of pages, whole pages, as like this can be exported as follows. Here's where to do it.
And then we automate based on policy rules.
Yeah, that sounds really great. Love it.
So I'm curious if there's any open source projects other than MediaWiki that NASA is very closely involved in and has also made very cool contributions to the community that it would be interesting for us to check out other than MediaWiki.
So completely sorry. Question was if NASA has other open source projects that were that we've contributed.
Worked as closely with the community in.
That's a good question. What other projects does NASA have that are open source that they've contributed in? So there is a NASA group on GitHub that has a lot of stuff in it, and I can't speak to everything that's there. Again, NASA's a big agency, and I probably can't even speak to the entirety of what's coming from. Definitely can't speak to the entirety of what's coming from JSC. I can say that what I'm working on now, which is not related to Wiki, we've got 4 applications, which I'm not going to go into, but one of them we've open sourced. I want to open source all of them. It's just a annoying process to go through. I mean, it's not even hard, it just takes forever. So we're working on that. But if you go to github.com/NASA, you'll find a bunch. If you go to /coda from there, that's the one that I've spent some time on. It's not actually useful to you at this point. We just open sourced it like last month, and it's like a lot of the bindings for working outside of NASA aren't there yet, but we will get there. But there are things like OpenMCT comes to mind. It's a mission control, I forget what the T stands for, is like a kind of mission control data telemetry system that is not used for ISS, but I think is used for some of the other missions coming out of like JPL and Ames. And the group that works on that has a bunch. There's a lot. All right. Cool. Thanks, everyone.